1 in 12 of us right here in America has a drinking problem. And tragically, by the time today's show ends, 5 of us, somebody's son, a young mom perhaps, will bring their lives to an end by abusing opioids. We're in the middle of an addiction epidemic, but are we doing enough to fix families in its grip? We're about to hear from ex-addicts and some of the country's most respected leaders in the areas of recovery and treatment. They've agreed to talk bluntly about the crisis and what it's really going to take for our nation to make a full recovery.
As a practicing physician, I wanted to create a place that folks could go to that not only delivers great health information in a way that's understandable and useful, but also share inspirational stories to help us all grow.
People think that once you're adults, you're done learning. You are not. In order to be successful, you have to have an open mind to learn.
Real problems discussed in depth with real solutions. This is the Dr. Nandi Show.
Drug overdoses now will kill more Americans in 1 year than the entire Vietnam War did. Even when addicts get treatment, there's an astonishing 30 to 90% chance that they will relapse. So today, we've all got to listen hard for a solution. Throughout the show, you're going to meet amazing people who battle every day to stay sober, to stay clean, to stay alive. And I want the discussion to focus on what should be done long term to help those with the disease of addiction win their own very personal war. See you right after this.
Discomfort is the cue. Anxiety is the cue. Stress is the cue. We go into a routine to address that cue. The routine for the child, reach for sugar in some form. Feel better for a little bit, then crash. There's your rhythm. Discomfort, seek out a high, crash, repeat.
Welcome back. You're watching the Dr. Nandi Show. My first guest had an acute drug and alcohol problem. He says addiction is really the disease of looking away, quote unquote, a failure to face up to pain or fear in your life. But 26 years ago, he found the courage to look at his problems head on, and ever since then has been in continuous recovery. He's also pioneered a new way to treat addicts. Please welcome my friend, Tommy Rosen. Being here. Absolutely. Appreciate it, my friend.
So glad to be here.
Yeah, Tommy's amazing. So you've had a very successful career helping yourself and others recover. Tell me about the basis of your addiction. What do you think led to your addiction?
First thing I want to say is most people think about addiction as a particular substance. So I drink too much. I'm an alcoholic. I'm addicted to heroin. I'm a drug addict. Addiction is so much more than just that. It's not about the substance, it's not about the behavior, but it's about the causes and the conditions underneath. So there's a condition known as addiction. It is any behavior you do despite the fact that that behavior brings a negative consequence into your life. If you continue that behavior, that's in the realm of addiction. So now already we're taking an expansive view of addiction.
Absolutely.
Drugs, of course, we all think about that when we think about addiction. Alcohol, of course, but how about food?
Yeah.
Do you think we have a food problem in this country?
Huge problem. Epidemic.
Oh, God. And our food addictions lead to type 2 diabetes, heart disease, obesity, childhood obesity.
But one of the first addictions people are introduced to is sugar. And we've talked about this before. Sugar is the first, substance that people are addicted to, with dopamine coming out and all of the pleasure factors. But yeah, please go ahead.
Yes. In addition, we have all the relationship disorders, codependency, sex addiction, a lot of shame around that one in particular. Just another place that human beings look to try to feel better. Beyond that, you have all the money-based addictions. So shopping, gambling, being constantly in a state of debt. And then I call those the big 5, but recently the big 5 became the big 6.
Yeah.
And technology addiction.
Yeah, big time.
So using technology not to enhance your life, but to avoid your life.
And Tommy, I actually believe, and I'd love to hear what you say, I actually believe all of us are addicts of something. And I don't think anybody escapes. You know, so it just depends on how society views you. For example, you know, I remember in college and high school, and I was a super overachiever. And if I did not do well in something, I mean, I decompensated. And now that I look back at it, listen, my parents loved it. Here's a kid who's overachieving, attaboy, right? But really, I was getting my self-worth based on an external factor, whether it be your grades or getting into a school or being in medical school. And so I don't think anybody escapes, but it just depends on how acceptable that addiction is. If you're a drug addict, you know, you're a derelict. Get out of here. You're weak. But if you're an overachieving business person who thrives on your business succeeding, you are a badass. You know, you're great. And so I think in society we forget about the essence, right? That it has to come from within. And we've talked about this. It's your personal relationship, and strengthening that is the basis, isn't it?
Yes. And I'm so glad you bring this up. I mean, basically everybody's on the spectrum. So the spectrum is, what if we change the word addiction to the human condition?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're in a condition where we're human beings and we are struggling in a variety of different ways. Everybody's facing something. And our natural inclination is to try to solve problems. The main problem we have generally as human beings is we don't feel well inside. We feel a sense of separation or loneliness, or maybe we felt a sense of insecurity or abandonment. The world is not a safe place. My needs are not going to get met. And as a result of those feelings, we start to reach out. And you said it best, as a child, the first thing we reach for is sugar. Right. And I call sugar the real gateway drug.
Absolutely.
So it starts there, and we start to set up a rhythm. And this is where people really start to understand addiction. The rhythm we're setting up is discomfort is the cue. Anxiety is the cue. Stress is the cue. We go into a routine to address that cue. The routine for the child, reach for sugar in some form. Feel better for a little bit, then crash. There's your rhythm. Discomfort, seek out a high, crash, repeat.
I'm going to take a break at this point. We'll come back with Tommy on the next section. We'll talk more about this. This is really fascinating. Such a pleasure.
My pleasure.
Please stay with us. You don't want to miss this.
Everybody has their story.
Yeah.
Some people react to their circumstances in a variety of different ways. My way of reacting, as I mentioned, was to set up a certain kind of rhythm in my life. It began with sugar. It advanced into drugs. First marijuana, alcohol, and then later on very serious drug abuse.
Welcome back. You're watching the Dr. Nandi Show, and a really important show. We're exploring ways to stop the addiction epidemic and also asking what can be done to reduce the chances of addicts in recovery relapsing and falling through the net. Now, Tommy Rosen's back with us, and we're talking about sugar as being the gateway drug. Tell me how yours started. What do you think the cause was for your addiction?
We're all born into a set of circumstances. Everybody has their story.
Yeah.
Some people react to their circumstances in a variety of different ways. My way of reacting, as I mentioned, was to set up a certain kind of rhythm in my life. It began with sugar. It advanced into drugs. First marijuana, alcohol, and then later on very serious drug abuse, cocaine and heroin. And as I look at it today, looking back 26 years, there's no shame about that for me, because I understand where I was coming from, what I was going through. And the choices I began to make as a child would inform the later, very painful and self-harming choices I would choose as an adolescent and then into my early 20s. What causes it? Discomfort, pain, disconnection, separation, loneliness, a feeling that you're not enough. In yoga, I would say a disconnection from self. I'm disconnected from me. I don't know how to feel good in my own skin. I don't know what baseline Tommy feels like. I never learned that. And I used food and hyperactivity and activity and sports, and I was like a kid just bouncing off the wall from one sugar event to the next through my childhood. So by the time I found drugs, marijuana in particular, and I really want your viewers to get this. The first time I ever smoked marijuana, I felt like it was the first time I'd taken a deep breath in my whole life. That I had never felt that kind of ease, that kind of comfort. There was relief. And I knew that that relief was something I could go after again and again. I had the power all of a sudden to change my emotional state of consciousness. And at that moment in time, I didn't realize the price I would later have to pay for that decision.
Let me go back a little bit. You know, you said something very interesting, and I didn't know that, and we've talked before, that was the first time you actually took a deep breath, and it could be an ease. What was childhood like? I mean, did you feel not at ease throughout most of your childhood? Tell me about that.
So children are displaying a lack of ease in a variety of ways.
Sure.
Mine was more on the positive side, so hyperactivity. My parents would say things like, "You can't ever sit still. Could you please just sit still? Why don't you stop? Please sit down, calm down." You know, that was always my thing, was hyperactivity. I was the kid who woke up on the right side of bed. I wasn't a depressive type. I loved life. I wasn't trying to get away from life. I loved my life. I loved sports. I loved my friends. I loved it all. But
were you always trying to find the sweet spot, though? You know what I mean? Like you're trying to find a place where you felt really good?
Everybody's trying to find that. Every human being, you're born into this world, you're seeking comfort right away.
But were you finding it? What I'm saying is, when you were hyperactive, when you were doing those things, was it a constant yearning, or was it something you actually reached?
I think what happens for a person who's an addict is comfort becomes the moment when you get the concoction just right.
Yeah.
And it's fleeting. You get everything just right. The outside world finally organizes itself the way the inside world wants it to, which, by the way, is incredibly rare. So what we have to do is, in recovery, we have to teach people one day at a time, first of all, to have an inner focus, start to connect here, and start to find out, how could this be in a place of contentment and happiness regardless of what's going on in the outside world? For the addict, it's the opposite. The outside world is bad, is scary, is frightening, is evil, there's trouble out there. And if it doesn't arrange itself to my liking, I can't find peace.
And the only way you can do that is with whatever behavior simulates that, and you find that and you want to go back to that because you can't find it anywhere else.
That's it. So all we're really talking about here is habit and the formation of habit. We adopt a routine, repeat the routine over time. It becomes a habit. In the mind, it becomes a habit. Also in the body, in the brain, neural pathways are formed which reinforce the habit that you've always chosen. Now, if we really want to change that, you can't just tell an addict or somebody, "Hey, why don't you just stop?"
Right.
The consequences of your life. Look what you've done. It's so terrible. You're risking your life, you're risking your family, you're risking your job. But that's like telling a homeless person, you know, "Why don't you just get a house?"
Right.
That's not looking at the complexity of what you're dealing with. What you have to explain to a person who's suffering an addiction is, you can't just stop, but here's what we'll do. We'll try a new routine, which will bring about a sense of ease for you, similar to the sense of ease you used to feel from the old routine.
Without having the detrimental effects that you had before. We have to take a break. When we come back, we'll stay with Tommy. This is amazing stuff that people just don't talk about with addiction. Please stay right here with us.
And all of a sudden, if you take drugs and alcohol away from that person, it's not as if their character is just built into this pristine, beautiful character of a wonderful human being. You now have to become
you.
You have to become you.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with me on the Dr. Nandi Show. And we're talking about recovery with expert Tommy Rosen. He's been clean and sober for 26 years, but huge numbers of people in recovery fall off the wagon, and we all know it to be true. So Tommy, we talked about what happened and some of the things that happen for people who are addicts. How did you change your life around? And then how have you taken that gift and then helped others with this revolutionary new technique that you're using to help people really reclaim their lives?
For me, like all people who struggle with acute addiction or chronic addiction, when it gets that bad, it's going to take a person arriving at a bottom. And what I mean by a bottom is a person reaches a point where they can no longer continue to live the way they've been living, even though they have no idea how else they could live.
Right.
You might say they've come to a point where they can tell the truth. And I told the truth. And I told the truth to my father. And my dad had always been there for me. My mom had always been there for me also. I had an incredibly close relationship with my dad. So I reached out to him and I told him everything but the truth in the first part of that conversation.
Yes,
you know,
yes.
Life's hard, my girlfriend broke up with me, school's not going so well, I have no money, like everything was wrong with my life. And he just sort of cut through and he said, you know, I know you're on drugs. I know you're on drugs and you're going to have to get help. And I said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not doing it, Dad. I don't want to become one of those people. And there was a silence on the phone and I recognized my father had started crying.
Oh.
And for a moment, I had what you'd call a moment of awakening. And I could see myself clearly through my father's tears. And so I tell people I got sober on the tears of my dad. And it's true, and thank God he was there for me, my family was there for me. And I went and I got help. The takeaway from this story for anybody watching this is nobody does this thing alone.
Exactly.
You have to have a human being. Somebody is going to intervene and help you. Because when you're at that point and you're stuck, I mean, anybody, when you're trying to get to the next level of anything,
That's exactly right.
you got to have somebody.
Human beings are, I think, we're hardwired to work in tribes. And there are some people who can do it alone, that's the exception. But if we have a tribe supporting us, that's the key. But you provide support to so many addicts. Tell us your technique and what do you do?
What I recognized is after I'd gotten sober, which is a miracle unto itself, I started to experience life. Life happened. You know, they say, what do you get when you sober up a horse thief? Sober horse thief. You still have all the challenges of your life. Now,
Right.
when I was in addiction, what I tell people is, you know, I lied, but I'm not a liar. You know, I cheated, but I'm not a cheater. I stole, but I'm not a thief. But I existed as somebody who did those things. And all of a sudden, if you take drugs and alcohol away from that person, it's not as if their character is just built into this pristine, beautiful character of a
Right.
wonderful human being. You now have to become
Be you.
You have to become you, and you have to become a great human being, as all of us are trying to become. And the way that works, again, is community, lots of support, and you have to have a path to walk. The path of the 12 steps is a very powerful path that provides a person with a way out of addiction. It absolutely works. People misunderstand it sometimes. Other people reject it at times. But if you put your heart and soul into it, it works.
And you've incorporated spirituality into this as well.
Spirituality is a key part of the human condition.
Correct.
Therefore, it has to be a key part of recovery. The addict is just seeking. We have a longing like any other human being. We're all seeking. So we're just looking in the wrong places. Now in recovery, we have to start looking in the right places.
And I love the fact that you say when somebody's an addict and you have them go into recovery, you give them something more acceptable, more suitable, less detrimental. Because you just say, oh, you can't just say, well, stop drinking or stop doing this and expect a miracle. It just doesn't happen. You give them something instead of that detrimental behavior. And then you give them more the subtle changes that they can experience in spirituality. And yoga has been tremendous in your teachings, correct?
Yes, oh, huge. I want to come to that. I'll just simply say that once you take drugs and alcohol away from a human being who's been used to navigating life through that, these other things start showing up, other forms of addiction that we spoke about earlier in your show.
Yeah.
So I had to start dealing with relationships. I had to start dealing with my relationship with food, with women, romantic relationships, relationships with my family, relationships with colleagues at work. All of a sudden I had to figure out how can I be in this world? And I took drugs and alcohol partially because I was so uncomfortable about those relationships
To begin with.
with.
And now you got to deal with it.
Yes. So what happens for a lot of people, you're talking about relapse. Why do people relapse? Sometimes people fall off the path because they get sideswiped by a relationship. We call that another form of addiction called codependency. They haven't yet figured out where do they end and where does another person begin. And that happens to people sometimes at 10 years sober. And they have a divorce, or they get into a new relationship, they get married, whatever, and all of a sudden all these issues come up and it knocks them right on their butt. And they don't know what happened. What happened to me? I'm miserable like the way I used to be miserable when I picked up drugs and alcohol. And then maybe they have a really bad day and off they go. They relapse. Maybe they die of a heroin overdose. And what you'll hear in the paper or friends will say, they died of heroin addiction. And it's not true.
Exactly right.
It's not true. They died of codependency, unchecked. They died of relationship disorders, unchecked. The way that they went out was through heroin or whatever it was, but that was not the cause of death.
Your book is called Recovery
Yes.
2.0.
Yes.
And what is how can they find out more about your entire method?
Sure. Well, come to r20.com. So just the letter R, number 2, number 0.com. And our whole world of videos and lectures about yoga and meditation, lifestyle, food, how to relate, how to understand addiction from a broader perspective, how to move beyond shame. I mean, it's so deep. There's a lot there.
That's awesome. Will you come back to our show?
Oh, my goodness. Of
Thank
course
you.
I
It's been
will.
such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Tommy Rosen, everybody. Let's take a break. When we come back, you'll meet Ashton. She was a Girl Scout who sold cookies and was a straight-A student from a great home. So what went wrong? Her powerful story is next. Please stay with us.
I woke up on June 23rd, 2013. I was already starting to experience some withdrawal symptoms. I called my dealer. I set up a time and a place. I set my phone down. I picked up my phone again and called a treatment center, and they happened to have a bed available. And then I made the most difficult phone call of my life. I called my dad to ask me if he could give me a ride.
Welcome back. You're watching the Dr. Nandi Show. Very important show, in my opinion. My next guest says she was a perfectly normal kid, excelled in school, enjoyed being in the Girl Scouts. Although her parents separated, she says she was never starved of love. And when she became a teen, she started to become anxious. And at school, cocaine was as easy to get as candy. Please welcome Ashton Marr. Ashton, thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you so much for
Super
having me.
important. So, people have lots of misconceptions, right? Because anybody who's an addict must come from a broken home or have some problems, but you came from a good family, lots of love. So what gives?
Well, you're absolutely right. By all outward appearances, I was a happy and well-adjusted kid, and I have a great family. My mom and dad both are to this day my number one supports. And when I got to high school, it was like this whole new world opened up to me, and all of a sudden I was very unsure of my place in the world, and I became very anxious. And I didn't know that it was okay to not be okay, that there was help. And so when substances were presented to me,
When is the first time, do you remember the very first time you used something?
I was 14 years old, and it was only a couple weeks after I started high school.
And how did it happen? What was going on? Just if you could tell me.
So it was simple. We were, a friend of mine and I, we were walking around campus. We were freshmen. We weren't allowed to leave campus for lunch, but she told me that she planned on leaving. And I had never broken the rules ever before in my life, and I was horrified. And then for whatever reason, I realized that I could break the rules too. And we went across the street, we went into the woods, and some other kids were using substances, and that's how it
Would you
all
use first marijuana or?
Yeah, tobacco first.
Tobacco first, then marijuana, then cocaine.
Yeah.
And so, did it help you with the anxiety? Did you feel, we're talking to Tommy Rosen just a little while ago, did it help you with being at ease when you use those substances? Did the anxiety get better?
At first it did. I felt more confident, and then as my addiction progressed, it actually sort of fueled this self-loathing that was part of my
Really?
chronic health disorder. Yeah, yeah.
And you just felt horrible about yourself. But then when you took the substance, for the time that you were high, did you feel good about yourself? And then it was gone again.
Yep.
Then you kept trying to find it.
Yep. It was a horrible crash.
When you didn't have it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so then you had another event that really changed a lot. You were already using substances. You had an appendectomy. Your appendix was taken out, right? You were 19. What happened then?
That was my first exposure to opioid-based pain medication, and I had this reaction to it. I don't know how to explain it, but it felt like the solution to all my problems at the time, and all of a sudden that anxiety was no longer a factor for me. I thought it was the solution, and it wasn't. It was the beginning of a very dark journey. Yeah.
You kept your addiction, hidden from your family for years. And what happened? What rock bottom did you hit that you finally said, I've got to talk to somebody about it or tell my family?
I can't even explain it to this day. I woke up on June 23rd, 2013. I was already starting to experience some withdrawal symptoms. I called my dealer. I set up a time and a place. I set my phone down. I picked up my phone again and called a treatment center, and they happened to have a bed available. And then I made the most difficult phone call of my life. I called my dad to ask me if he could give me a ride.
What did he say?
And thank God he did. He did. I couldn't even get the words out because the stigma surrounding this issue.
The shame, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And he didn't even know where we were going. We pulled up out in front of the treatment center, and he started to figure things out. And he said, may I ask what kind of drugs you're using? And even then, I couldn't get the words out. And I just started sobbing and said, bad ones. And he hugged me and he said, this is the bravest thing I've ever seen anybody do. Please just do the best you can, and we'll figure the rest out together.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so.
'Cause what if he had said something different or blamed you or didn't treat you the way he did? What would have happened?
I wouldn't be sitting here with you today, that's for sure. I needed that non-judgmental, loving support. And that was critical for me to help save my life.
That's so amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
On your recovery and the fact that you're giving all your knowledge forward. It's amazing what you've done. It's amazing that you've stayed clean, and I know how hard that is. It's unbelievable. And for those of you who are watching, here's the thing. The love that her dad gave her saved her life. And you can judge your kids, you can judge your spouse, you can judge your friends, but that judgment can lead to someone dying. And just always remember that. Thank you for explaining that and giving us that story so that we understand people who've never been through this. We'll take a break. When we come back, at 14, he was drinking after school. By 18, he was addicted to crack cocaine, a habit he was so desperate to feed he stole from his own grandma. But he's turned his life around. His story coming up next.
I was a senior in high school and I was introduced to crack cocaine. And the minute that I used crack cocaine, all bets were off.
Welcome back. You are watching the Dr. Nandi Show, and today, really important show. Drugs destroy families. My next guest knows that only too well because after years of addiction, not everyone in his family are on speaking terms with him. He had a heavy crack cocaine habit, but he's been clean for over 4 years now and knows forgiveness, like recovery, can take time. The 36-year-old is rebuilding his life, and 9 months ago, he became a father, and the future is looking bright. Please welcome Jeremy Barton. Congratulations on being a dad. Absolutely. I'll start right away. Your addiction started at age 14 and then just start escalating, and your family reported you to the police, my notes say. What happened?
Yeah, so I started off like, I guess, what normal kids do, smoking weed after the football game, drinking a couple beers, and then it progressed into cocaine, and then I was a senior in high school and I was introduced to crack cocaine. And the minute that I used crack cocaine, all bets were off. I was willing to do whatever it took to get high, and I started stealing from my family.
Do you remember the first time you used it?
Yeah.
And what happened?
It was just, for me, it was the greatest feeling in the world.
And in what way were you not feeling good before that?
Like growing up, my mom and dad had got divorced at a really young age, and then my mom had her own substance abuse issues. So when I was 14, she had got busted selling crack or cocaine, and I was forced to go live with my grandparents, and I had a lot of anger, and I had a lot of resentments about myself and whether I was good enough, and why did my mom do the things that she did. So when I used any sort of substance, it took them feelings away.
It took the pain away, didn't it?
It took the pain away. It took the anger away. It took the not feeling like I was good enough, like I didn't care about those feelings.
When it got so bad, your own family called the police on you. What did you do?
Yeah, I had, at the point that they called the police, like I had stole TVs, I had stole guns, I had stole radios, I had stole car radios, and they kept telling me, you do it again, we're gonna call the cops, and I had took the fax machine. At the time it was 2000, so fax machines were kind of cool back then.
Yeah.
They were expensive, and I took
It was
it.
your grandma's, huh?
Yeah, and I was living with my grandparents, and they called the cops.
And then what happened? You went to jail?
I went to jail, and a lot of shame and guilt set in, and then the process just kept repeating. I was charged with a felony. I got out of jail, and now it's even harder for me to get employment. It's even harder for me to do the things I do, because not only am I suffering from the substance use disorder, but I also have a felony on my record, which makes it even harder.
And here's the thing, at one point you were $100 a day on crack.
Yeah.
Can you, looking back, do you find that an amazing thing?
Yeah, because now I got to pay bills, and and I got credit cards, and I'm using my credit cards when I'm like, I was doing $100 a day crack habit, and somehow, some way, every single day I would find the money to do that.
And you're doing so well. Now what happened? How'd you hit your rock bottom that made you come back to life and say, I got to stop doing this?
So in July of 2014, I was released from my third prison term. I had been prison 3 different times, and they sent me to rehab, and within a 3-month period, I had went to rehab, I had went to transitional housing, I had got kicked out of transitional housing, I had been let back into transitional housing, I had been in a homeless shelter, I had been in another rehab, got kicked out of rehab, I had been to jail, and I had been to rehab for the last time, and I was sitting in rehab for the last time, and I'm like, look, either I'm gonna get sober and I'm gonna stop doing this, or this is gonna be my life. I'm going to spend the rest of my life in jails, institutions, rehabs, or I'm going to wind up dead.
And I know before we were talking, you said that guilt and shaming is not the way, is it?
No.
This is really important for those of you who have family members, friends, anybody, a loved one. Guilting someone, shaming them is not the way, is it?
No, so I had my beautiful son in the audience today, and I was thinking about that before I came up today. And my girlfriend, my fiance, she's in long-term recovery too. And we have a beautiful son, and for the rest of his life, he's gonna know substance use as love. And to us as a community can know that same love that he sees for his 2 parents that are in long-term recovery. We're not gonna get the solutions that we could get.
Absolutely, and your story is so amazing that you can come from that place, 3 prison terms, hitting rock bottom, and look where you are. The future is bright for you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story with us. And if there's a message that I can give you from his story, that again, no guilt, no shame. Remember that love will persevere. Support the people around you, give them the tools, and remember that addiction is a response to pain, not a weakness in character. We come back, we'll hear from Dr. Carl Christensen. He's actually an expert witness for the DEA and the Department of Justice regarding physicians and the opioid epidemic. He's also the director of Dawn Farm Treatment Center in Ypsilanti, Michigan. Please stay with us.
Withdrawal is not the cause of addiction. Withdrawal is over very quickly, and most people, once they go through withdrawal, never have a problem again.
We're watching the Dr. Nandi Show, and what we're learning today is that there's a lot more that can be done to help people recover from their addiction. And I'm joined now by a doctor who says it doesn't matter what the addiction is, drugs, drink, shopping, or sex. The root cause is the same. From Michigan's Dawn Farm Treatment Center, please welcome Dr. Carl Christensen. Dr. Carl, thank you so much for joining us. Now, I think that we know that there's a genetic link to addiction, but what else do you think has been linked to be at least somewhat of a cause for addiction?
So as you know, the genetics are important, especially for males. Trauma is important also, and trauma can be either emotional, physical, sexual. It doesn't have to be something as horrific as rape trauma. It can be splitting of a family. It can be abandonment that lasts until adulthood. It can be a drug that is so reinforcing, which is the essence of addiction. A drug is so reinforcing that it can cause addiction all by itself. And the ones we typically talk about are crack cocaine, tobacco, and also food. And then once somebody is in recovery, you can take somebody who is stable in recovery and you can cause a relapse by either exposing them to that drug or putting them under stress. And we talk about in early recovery, don't let yourself become hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. That's HALT. Or being exposed to a cue. So you can walk past a bar or walk past your old drug dealer, and just the cue of doing that will cause an overwhelming urge to use.
And what about that statement I was talking about, is that addiction is a response to some sort of pain? What do you think about that?
It's true. It can be either an underlying genetic condition or it can be something that has happened to you during your life. And actually, chronic pain itself can also, in some people, trigger an addiction.
And by pain, I do mean more, not even just physical pain, but emotional pain.
Yes.
And it's a reaction that I think people, I think judge, addiction in a very different way. When you have somebody with an addict, how does the brain behave under the circumstances of being under the influence of a drug or a substance or whatever behavior? How does the brain behave under those circumstances?
So think about 3 different parts of your brain. There's your frontal cortex. That's your impulse control, your judgment, your thoughts. There's your hindbrain, which is the withdrawal center. And withdrawal is not the cause of addiction. Withdrawal is over very quickly. And most people, once they go through withdrawal, never have a problem again. And then in the middle is your primitive forebrain. We call it the lizard brain, which is your pleasure center, your nucleus accumbens that releases dopamine, and then your memory pathways, your hippocampus, and different parts that respond to stress and respond to emotional cues.
How about the stigma, right? So much has been said about people who are addicts, just stick them in jail and forget about them because it's them, those bad people. What do you think about that stigma? How should we approach people with this?
So there's an extra layer of stigma compared to other people with mental illness, because addicts, people with addiction, will commit crimes, and they're responsible for those crimes.
Right.
So that stigma gets held up as let's punish them for their crimes, and society can do that, but it doesn't treat them. And typically someone with addiction is incarcerated for a short while, and then the whole thing starts over again.
Yeah, and the shame and the guilt has to stop as well. What about other forms? Should we give them financial resources? How should we support these people that are going through it? Well, listen, if you have a diabetic that's going through a crisis, or a person with heart disease, we don't typically incarcerate them if they, for example, are desperate to get their medication. How should we help these folks?
So first off, there's many different available treatments. So as a physician, we know that we need to give the patient informed consent and give them the different available treatments. And one of the first treatments available is counseling. The most common counseling is called cognitive behavioral therapy, where you try and identify a false belief that a patient has that leads them to addictive behavior. You can also have medication, and there are 3 medications that are approved for opioid dependence. It's methadone, buprenorphine, which we all call Suboxone or Zubsolv, and then naltrexone, which we all call Vivitrol. And finally, there is a spiritual program, and I think the men and women that we've heard from most recently have a spiritual program, which to me means they have made a connection with something bigger than themselves. And spiritual programs can be 12-step, Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous. It can be faith-based. It doesn't have to involve religion, but it has to involve recognizing there's something out there bigger than yourself, and you have to take direction.
And that's so critical. I appreciate you telling us that. The thing is that you have to be able to get a better relationship with yourself. And what he said at the end about having a spiritual relationship is so critical in the addicts treatment and the people supporting them. You cannot do this alone. You have to have, everybody here has had some support. Dr. Christensen, thank you so much for being here. Really informative. I appreciate it. I'll be back with Partha's Prescription. Welcome back. You've been watching the Dr. Nandi Show, and today we talked about America's spiraling addiction problem. Now here are my prescriptions for you. First, addiction is a response to pain. You have to treat what's at the core of that abuse. Also, treatment centers can help stop addiction, but there needs to be ongoing support from our community to avoid relapse. Also, addiction is everyone's problem to deal with, not just the addicts. Please give the addicts the tools they need to become fully functioning members of the community again. And if there's an addict in your family, please, no blame, no shame. To stay informed about today's topic, learn about healthy living, and how to become your own health hero, please visit AskDrNandi.com. Also, I'd love to hear from you. Be sure to search for Partha Nandi MD on Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest, and join our discussion. Lastly, there's a beautiful word in the Hindi language that literally means the light in me honors the light in you, and that word is namaste. So namaste to each and every one of you. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.